All right, guys, yesterday was the deadline for Joel Bitonio to figure out his future, and I'm assuming, Zach, no word means not good news for anyone wanting Joel to return. At this point, I feel like we have to assume he's retiring because we haven't had any news, and we certainly would have heard news if he was coming back.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the way to read it, right? That combined with the Browns' actions, the money they've put in. So I think it was always leaning that way. I don't think Joel took any part of this decision lightly. I have not spoken to him this offseason, but last offseason I did speak to him, and he felt like he was reconsidering. He felt like he came out of 24 thinking that he wanted to play, and then he wasn't so sure, and he came back. This year I think he was always leaning towards retirement, and I think what makes it easier is all his friends are leaving, all the guys that he's done with, right? So this is a new thing here. So he will be remembered and should be remembered as a great Cleveland Brown. The numbers back that up in terms of the games played and the durability.
He's a Ring of Honor guy, dude.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, the Hall of Fame is a different story. We can discuss that, but I mean, he's definitely going to be remembered as an all-time great Cleveland Brown. All-time great.
When Joe Thomas went in the Hall of Fame, I was interviewing him, and I said, let me ask you a question while I got you about Joel. And he said, let me tell you about the Hall of Fame. He said, there are not many guards that have ever walked this planet that have Joel's combination of power and athleticism. He said, so Joel belongs in the Hall of Fame someday.
He would know.
And that's a pretty good source. Now, is it a biased source? Sure, but that's a pretty good source.
The list of guards in the Hall of Fame, I looked it up. It's the who's who in the history of football, and as a guard to make it to Canton feels damn near impossible.
And most of them were like 8 or 9 time All-Pros,
yes.
Teams that always played in the Super Bowl or in the conference championship game. It's stacked against Joel as far as making the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about it.
The odd, and once again, offensive line play, I trust the Joe Thomases of the world way more than I trust, frankly, with all due respect, all of us.
Sure.
They know the ins and outs, the what you can, what you can't do, what you can get away with, what makes one guy slightly better than another. Joel versus, Zach Martin, for example, was, two of the best guards in football for 10 years. One of them probably gets in, one of them doesn't. But I do know this. Over his course in Cleveland, since he was drafted in 2014, the list of offensive linemen that were more consistent and better than Joel Bitonio is incredibly short.
For sure.
5 All-Pro selections, 7 Pro Bowls. I don't really care about the Pro Bowls, but the 5 All-Pro selections, 2 first-team selections, 3 second-team selections was the peak of durability. I mean, you guys have been here longer than me. I went through his Pro Football Reference page.
Yeah.
Almost never missed games, and more important than anything else, when Joel was on the field, even to the end of his career, obviously play declined slightly, you knew exactly what you were getting.
Let me speak to the durability.
Exactly.
2 of his first 3 years ended with injury. In his last 9 years, how many games he missed by injury?
I would say
3.
3, yeah.
1.
One.
1 in 9 years. So they kept extending him and kept working. And the other thing, too, is think about all the scheme changes, all the coordinator changes. We talked about the left tackle changes. We haven't talked about the quarterback changes because we'll be here till way past the time that we need to be here, right? But he produced. Some guys are just great fits in certain schemes, in certain systems with a certain guy next to him. Joel was consistently good, even great.
And on top of that, you know how hard it is to be great on a bad team in a bad organization, and to stay positive and to have a positive mental approach with your teammates and be a good teammate and have a revolving door of guys playing next to you and to not get frustrated. And by the way, he plays a position on offensive line where it's you're required to play well. You have to have help from your buddies. And he hasn't had lately a lot of guys around him that's been stable. So it just speaks to everything about the guy is steady Eddie. Not even, it's beyond steady Eddie because he's elite at what he does. Yeah. And what's the good line Tress always says? The hallmark of excellence is consistency and performance. Dude is consistent as a mother every day.
In this area was Nick Chubb and Joel, right? Because Nick Chubb came in after Joe had retired. Mm-hmm. Those guys who just showed up, low maintenance, superstars, didn't want the extra shine, didn't get it for whatever reason. Chubb got it a little bit, right? But Joel was a guard on a bad team, and he kept producing. Yep. And so the fact that he will be a Hall of Fame finalist someday, probably not an inductee, says it all, but he's certainly a Cleveland Browns Ring of Honor guy, certainly an all-time. Every time he comes back, on it. I don't think they'll retire his jersey. There's a lot that goes into that in the NFL, but he's at the top of a very short list of guys you would consider, and he will, like I said, in this era of Cleveland Browns football. And he played more than a decade at guard at a high level.
It's hard to do.
Hard to do.
And he checks all the boxes. When you look at guard in particular, there are certain positions in football where you want guys that have a little more swag, a little more charisma. Mm-hmm. You don't. To your point,
They're in the dirt, dude. You
don't want to hear their names. The only time you're hearing their name on Sunday is 98 out of 100 instances when something bad happens.
Right.
A holding call.
False start,
a legal procedure. But Bitonio became a household name in Cleveland at a position that you never want to hear from.
Yeah.
Frankly, I don't want my guards really like talking to the media. Not because they're some of the smartest guys in football, but I want them to be innocuous. I don't want them to be unknowns. I don't want their faces plastered all around. When I think of the Browns since I've been here, and we started this show in May of 2022. We're coming up on 4 years here. Bitonio's been the stalwart of Cleveland. It's Miles, Bitonio, and Njoku's now gone, but those were the three that had, and Denzel if you want to include him, but he slightly different position, not as plastered. But I drive past the stadium every day to work, and it's Bitonio's face on the first platform you see.
Yeah.
And it's Bitonio who they've trotted out as kind of the voice of reason in many occasions. And he has been the epitome.
Now, part of that is their mess at quarterback.
Once again, you can put circumstances on anything you want.
No,
Zach.
well, right.
But he's become the face of the offense, and I can't remember a time ever in football where the offensive left guard has essentially been the face of a team.
Well, I'll give you this to back that up, though. Amid a decade of horrendous drafting, and this draft in particular, you know who the first pick was of Joel Bitonio's draft for the Browns? Justin Gilbert. Epic disaster. You know who the second pick was of Joel Bitonio's draft? John Paul Manziel.
Yeah.
Epic disaster. Oh, by the way, in the second round, they got this rock-solid guy who's just one of the best to do it at his position in a long, long time.
From Nevada.
Left tackle at Nevada. Comes in, plays guard.
Played in the freaking Mountain West, and now he's
nuts.
All-timer.
In terms of the Ring of Honor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we've gotten 36 super chats in the last 2 years, the fact that Bernie Kosar is not in the Ring of Honor. And is there a process for the Browns inducting names into the Ring of Honor that I'm not familiar with?
Okay, the Browns don't have something called the Ring of Honor. Okay. The Browns have what's called Legends Class, and Bernie Kosar absolutely is in it. The ring, the names that are there are the Hall of Famers. Okay.
So Browns Hall of Fame.
Browns Hall of Famers go there, and then Joe has a special one for his snap streak.
Yeah.
Is it Hall of Famers that are in Canton that play for the
Yes.
Browns? Or like
Yes.
Brown specific?
No.
Browns.
Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Football Hall of
Okay.
Famers. But the Browns have a Legends Class, and Bernie absolutely is in it.
Lou Groza, Jim Brown.
That's great to know.
That's a semantics thing.
We have had many super chats, and I know Bull lost his mind one day over Bernie not being in there.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
That's the first time.
It makes it.
I want to. So it was super awkward when the Browns came back, right? Because they were rushed back and they weren't good, and it was like this was rushed, and it's because they were so good back then, and everybody had all these hard feelings because none of the guys were. First of all, the team wasn't good to that, but none of the guys were involved, and it was a lot of going on. So one of the things they tried to do to bridge that gap was establish the Legends Class, and the Hall of Famers automatically went in that.
Okay.
But then they started the Legends Class of 3 or 4 a year, and then they cut it to 2 just to space it out. And so Bernie absolutely is part of that group. So what is it, 12 or 13 Hall of Famers that the Browns have? Joe was 13.
I'll trust
I
you.
feel like I should know that.
You know, and obviously Joe's the only one from the new era, and a lot of them are from way, way back because it's Paul Brown, it's Jim Brown.
That makes a lot more sense.
Whatever. But the Legends Class was established, I want to say, in like 2004 to 2006 range, and now most years only one player is getting put in it, sometimes 2. But, Jim Donovan was inducted. Phil Dawson was inducted.
Joel Bitonio.
Yeah, Joel
will be
Bitonio,
inducted.
as soon as he's eligible, will be inducted.
Is there a waiting period like the Hall of Fame?
There's not. So if they want to do it this year.
I would like to see Joel
As soon
Bitonio
as he
smashing
retires.
guitar this year. Like on Joel Bitonio Day against who's a team they can run against? I don't know. Whatever team with this new established offensive line honoring 75, who is the epitome of what you'd want a franchise pillar to be from the interior of the offensive line. So Joel, if this is it, thank you for everything, man.
No, as someone there on a near daily basis, this is absolutely the epitome of
18 Hall of
professionalism.
Famers.
18, okay.
18.
But Joel, absolutely the epitome of professionalism on and off the field, in the meeting room. You know, as he got older, he became the voice and kind of relaying from the coach down. But even just because you're an older player doesn't mean, like, you have to earn that respect in the locker room. Because as he got older, the guys got younger.
Right.
But they all respected the hell out of Joel Bitonio, I can tell you that.
Before we move on to the next topic, do you have any Joel stories over the last decade, however long you've been covering the Browns?
That's a good one.
I'd tell you, we had a great conversation with him one time. I was doing this stupid article in the offseason about who are the best basketball players. Like if there was a pickup basketball game,
Myles
who you
Garrett.
take, right? And obviously Myles Garrett. Sure. But Joel was telling me about how he grew up wanting to be a basketball player, and actually was a high school basketball player.
But he was really good, too.
Right. The problem was he was against all these guys at the time that were phenomenal, and he was a 6'2.5", big guy, but he was good at his job. So I was like, did you ever think? And he goes, well, actually, the first sport I ever played was roller hockey. And I thought, and he goes, yeah, trust me, I was a big kid, and I was stocky, and I was strong, and I think I was taken out of roller hockey because they were afraid I was going to name someone. He's like, so I brought that mentality with me playing football and basketball to do it, and just super athlete, super nice, just perfect. Like the whole organization, every layer of the organization will miss him the second this becomes official.
We're going to do a segment when the Cavs come up about setting screens the right way, and Joel Bitonio would set a mean screen. Yes. Joel Bitonio, James Harden pick and roll, if Bitonio had any finishing ability and was like 8 inches taller, would be.
I think he averaged 8 or 10 in high school at a pretty prominent Southern California program.
Mm-hmm.
It's a legit ball.
He's he's an elite athlete.
He is an elite
to
athlete,
move into his side, doesn't surprise me. DeJuan Jones was also a really good basketball player back in the day. He's super sized, but
he was a basketball recruit until football came along.
Most offensive linemen, most defensive, all these guys played hoops growing up and and they were really good in high school because you have to be. They're ridiculous elite athletes because they're 300 pounds doesn't mean that they can't dominate on the court.
Quentin Nelson, the guard for the Colts, grew up 2 towns from where I grew up in Jersey. Played against my little brother in high school. My brother still has a crick in his neck from running into a Quentin Nelson screen in a high school summer league game.
Yeah. Remember the Mekhi Becton highlights from a few drafts ago?
Yeah.
It just didn't look real.